My daughter erased me from her wedding, but she never imagined the truth I would uncover. A polished stranger thought he could steal her future and our family home. Stay with me, because this story ends in handcuffs and freedom. Hello, dear friends. Before I begin, please tap like and subscribe so you won't miss new stories, and tell me in the comments, which city are you listening from today? My name is Karen Brooks, and I am 65 years old enough to know that life has a habit of circling back to test whether you've learned its lessons. I used to think I knew my daughter, Chloe, the way a shoreline knows the tide, the rhythms, the moods, the predictable returns. For years, our days had a gentle cadence. At 12:15, right as my kettle clicked off, my phone would ring. Lunch break, she'd sing, and I would pour Earl Grey into my blue mug, the one with a little chip on the handle. We talk about everything from office gossip to which series we were binging on Netflix. Sometimes she'd ask for my lasagna recipe again, though she never wrote it down because she liked hearing me say it, step by step, as if I were right there in her kitchen. We built that rhythm after storms. Her father, William, had once promised me a life with tidy columns and paid-up balances. Instead, his partner, a man with a handshake like a vice and eyes that never warmed, lured him into opportunities that unraveled our savings, our marriage, and nearly my sanity. I kept the house in Boston with its narrow staircase and creaky pine floors by working long shifts as a trauma nurse. When you spend nights coaxing breath back into broken bodies, you learn what matters. A roof, a bed, a daughter who falls asleep knowing she is safe. The only indulgence I allowed myself back then was the Cape Cod beach house, a weathered, salt-kissed cottage that had belonged to my aunt. It was small and a little lopsided, but it faced the sea with the stubborn dignity of an old lighthouse keeper. I refinanced, painted, patched shingles, and planted beach grass that would hold the dunes when the wind got mean. It wasn't just property, it was proof. Proof that the past couldn't have everything. So yes, by the time Ryan arrived, I had reasons to be cautious. Caution is a coat you don't take off at 65. It's stitched into you. Chloe brought him for dinner in early spring, one of those evenings when Boston can't decide if it will be kind. I opened the door to a remarkably polished man holding a bouquet that looked arranged by a florist who charged per syllable. He wore a slender suit, navy, I think, and expensive shoes that didn't dare squeak. His hair was an argument against the wind. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, with that warm molasses voice men practice in mirrors, "I've heard so much about you." "I hope only the good parts," I replied, and stepped aside. I had set the table with the good china, not because I was trying to impress him, but because I wanted Chloe to see our rituals honored. Candlelight, a linen runner, silver that remembered holidays. The lasagna hissed like a friendly cat as I lifted foil. "Smells incredible," Ryan said, and he meant for me to hear that he noticed. He helped carry plates without being asked. He took only after everyone else had served, and he complimented my garden, the house, my classic taste. That many points scored that quickly should have felt flattering. Instead, it felt rehearsed. There's a way genuine people look around a home, a restful curiosity, a smile that lands on family photos. Ryan's gaze skimmed and calculated, lingering on the framed watercolor of the Cape cottage near the mantel. We ate. He asked Chloe about her day, about her project at work, about whether she preferred kayaking or walking when we were at the coast. Then, casually, too casually, he asked about the beach house itself. "How long has it been in your family? Must be a great investment," he said, twirling his fork. He was offhand about it, as if we were discussing the weather. "Oh, it's not an investment," I said, and felt the steel in my tone. "It's our place." "Of course," he laughed, palms up, charming, retreating. "I just mean, coastal property in Massachusetts, you know? Taxes must be brutal. Insurance, too. What's the flood zone on your road?" I did not answer. Or rather, I answered with a smile you use when someone reaches for the cookie jar before dinner. He shifted undeterred. "And those Cape houses, they're skyrocketing. If you ever think of selling—" He caught himself, grinned. "Kidding. I can see it's sentimental." "More than that," I said. "It's where Chloe learned to swim and where my aunt taught her to slather sunscreen like frosting." Chloe laughed. He did too, a beat late. He was generous with the dishes, insistent about carrying the heavy pan to the sink. He stacked plates carefully, as if aware I might be watching for carelessness. My sister Ellen had once told me, "A man can fake kindness for 2 hours. Watch what he does when the movie ends." So I watched the quiet spaces, the way he positioned himself slightly between Chloe and me when we talked, the way his hand drifted to the small of her back, not tender but proprietorial, the way he steered the conversation back, again, to coastal weather, hurricane deductibles, market comps in Barnstable County. He complimented the sauce, he studied the equity. If only you could have seen what I would learn later. The names, the accounts, the history reaching its hand out of the past. If only you knew the secret I stumbled on, the one that made my blood go cold. But that night, I had only my instincts, and instincts make a lonely companion at a table set for 3. After dessert, lemon bars, slightly too tart, Ryan offered to take out the trash. "Please, let me," he said. "It's the least I can do." He lifted the lid on the can by the back door, looked toward the alley, then toward the small garden shed where I keep tools and the extra beach chairs. "You do everything yourself?" he asked, as if the idea fascinated him. "I always have," I said. When they left, Chloe hugged me. She smelled like the peony lotion I put in her Christmas stocking. "He really wanted to make a good impression," she whispered, as if I might have missed it. I squeezed her hand. "Drive safe," I said. Ryan waved from the sidewalk with the kind of smile politicians use when a camera is nearby. The house exhaled after they were gone. I washed the good plates by hand, because some things deserve attention. In the quiet, I thought about the ways men arrive. Some knock and wait. Some let the door swing and stride in as if the doormat had their name on it. Ryan did neither. Ryan floated, as if he had timed the tide. I dried the china and set it back in the cabinet, each piece in its old groove. In the living room, the watercolor of the Cape cottage caught a sliver of streetlight. The paint is a little faded now, the sky more pale than blue, but the roofline still holds. I touched the frame with 2 fingers and felt a certainty I couldn't yet name. People like Ryan don't trip onto your path by accident. They locate you. They measure. They mark. They move. I told myself not to be unkind. I told myself Chloe deserved my optimism. But the truth I can admit now, is that a chill moved through me that night like a draft under a door. Not fear, exactly. Recognition. Life, it seemed, was circling back to ask if I had learned. Later, in bed, I reached for my phone out of habit, half expecting Chloe to text a goofy selfie in the car, half expecting a little heart emoji the way she always signed off. Nothing. I set the phone down and listened to the city. A siren far off, a bus sighing at the corner, the neighbor's dog negotiating with the moon. I tried to pray and found myself counting instead, the old nurse's trick. Breath in for 4, out for 6. By 10, I could picture the cottage again. The crabgrass stubborn in the sand. The back steps where Chloe used to line up her seashells. The house doesn't blink when the wind rises. It flexes. Hold, I whispered into the dark, and I wasn't sure whether I meant the dunes or my daughter or myself. The weeks after that dinner blurred in the way seasons blur when you don't want them to change. Boston's April became May. The lilacs in my neighbor's yard spilled their perfume into the street, and still Chloe called less and less. Once upon a time, she would phone me if she burned toast, laugh when I told her to scrape it, and then call back just to say it tasted fine anyway. But now my phone lay silent most lunchtimes, its screen blank, while I stirred soup or folded towels alone. I told myself she was busy. Everyone gets busy. But it was not just busy, Tao. It was different. When I did hear her voice, it carried a new reserve, clipped, as though she measured each word against someone else's approval. That someone I knew was Ryan. I saw it in the little things. Chloe used to wear bright scarves, yellow in March, crimson in October. One afternoon when she stopped by, she was dressed in a sleek beige jacket, her scarf gone, her earrings understated. Her laugh, too, seemed quieter, as though she had been reminded not to take up too much space. When I commented gently, "No scarf today?" she smiled faintly and said, "Ryan thinks simple is better." Then she changed the subject. It was my sister, Ellen, who confirmed my unease. She flew in from Chicago one weekend and joined us for brunch at a cafe Chloe had once adored. I watched Ellen's face tighten as Chloe spoke. Later, while Chloe went to the restroom, Ellen leaned across the table and whispered, "Karen, she's not herself. She's edited. Can't you see?" Her voice shook a little, not with fear, but with anger. It's like he's trimming her down. I nodded, though the lump in my throat made it hard. I had seen it before. I had lived it before. My ex-husband, William, with his easy charm and endless promises, had done much the same. He had polished me into someone quieter, someone who nodded along until his business opportunities left us drowning in debts and me scrambling for extra shifts to keep the lights on. I had sworn Chloe would never have to live through a man's shadow like that. And yet here she was, drifting into the same pattern. Only this time, the shadow's name was Ryan. He began to appear everywhere. If Chloe and I planned a simple Saturday walk through the park, he tagged along, carrying coffee for all three of us, his smile practiced, his hand on her back. If I invited her over for tea, he arrived with her, unannounced, sitting on my sofa as though it had been waiting for him. He was never rude. No, he was careful, always polite, always deferential, but present in a way that closed doors rather than opened them. He filled the space so thoroughly that I barely had a private word with my own daughter anymore. Once I tried to talk to her directly. "Sweetheart," I said one evening when Ryan had stepped outside to answer a call, "are you happy? Really happy?" She looked startled, then defensive. "Of course, Mom. Why would you even ask?" "Because you sound different, less like yourself," she frowned. "Ryan says you worry too much. Maybe he's right." The words landed like ice water. Ryan says, as if her thoughts now had his watermark. I tried not to push, but I felt the distance widening. Calls dwindled to short check-ins, then texts, then sometimes nothing for days. The rhythm of our lunches, our conversations, our little rituals, all thinned out until they barely resembled what we once had. The shoreline I thought I knew so well was shifting, eroded by someone else's tide. Then came the night I learned how far the erosion had gone. It was a Friday evening, damp and foggy, when I sat down with a cup of tea and idly opened Facebook. The first post on my feed froze me. Chloe's hand, my Chloe's hand, the one I had held as she learned to write her name, stretched out against a backdrop of roses. On her finger glittered a diamond so large it looked like a stage prop. The caption read, He asked, and I said, yes. Hearts and champagne emojis cascaded in the comments below. Friends congratulated her, colleagues gushed, strangers clicked like. But my phone had not rung. I had not been told. I was not in the photo, nor in the comments, nor anywhere in the glow of her announcement. My daughter had said yes to a man, and no, silently, but unmistakably, to me. I called her, my hands trembling so much that I nearly dropped the phone. She answered, breathless with excitement. Mom, hi. Chloe, I managed. I just saw the post. Why didn't you tell me? Oh, Mom, we were so caught up in the moment. Ryan surprised me at dinner, and we were laughing and crying, and I meant to call, I really did. I just forgot. She giggled nervously, as though the word could erase the sting. Forgot. I murmured congratulations, because what else can a mother do in that moment? But when I hung up, the house felt hollow. The silence pressed against the windows like fog, forgotten, as if decades of sacrifice and love could be misplaced, like a grocery list. Over the following weeks, announcements poured in, an engagement party, a rehearsal dinner, photos with Ryan's family, smiling in suits and pearls, and I was not there. Invitations did not arrive. When I asked Chloe gently, she explained, Ryan's family is very particular about events. They prefer things to be intimate. Intimate, and I was not included. Each word felt like a stone placed between us. And then came the final blow. One evening she called, her voice almost casual, and said, Mom, we actually got married last weekend. Just a small ceremony. By the way, could you send us the keys to the beach house? We'd love to spend our honeymoon there. For a moment I could not breathe. Married, without me. Not even a seat in the back row, not even a witness. And now, as if I were merely a landlord, she wanted the keys. I sat at my kitchen table long after the call ended, the tea beside me gone cold. The photograph of us on the mantel, Chloe at age 6 with freckles from the Cape sun, seemed to blur. I pressed my hand to my chest to quiet the ache, but the ache would not still. Somewhere between the diamond ring and the missing invitation, I had been erased. But what I did not know yet, what none of them knew, was that erasure can be reversed. I had lost too much in my life to let this loss stand. And though Ryan believed he had succeeded in cutting me out, he underestimated the one thing I still carried, a mother's will sharpened by survival. What I discovered next made me realize I wasn't just being left out, I was being replaced. I woke the next morning with a heaviness in my chest, as though the night had pressed its weight onto me and refused to lift. The words replayed over and over. We actually got married last weekend. By the way, could you send us the keys? Married without me. Honeymooning in the house that had been my one sanctuary. For the first time in years, I didn't rise early to make tea. Instead, I sat in my nightgown at the kitchen table, staring at the quiet clock above the stove. I could still hear Chloe's laughter in that call, a little forced, as if she was trying to make light of the most devastating words she could have spoken to me. And Ryan, though I couldn't hear him in the background, I felt his presence shaping her sentences, pruning her words into something neat, obedient. The house felt colder, emptier. Even the sun through the lace curtains had lost its warmth. For hours I sat there, thinking back to when Chloe was a little girl, twirling in a white dress she'd begged me to buy at the thrift store. She had looked in the mirror and said, "Someday, Mom, when I get married, you'll be right there fixing my hair." That memory pulsed in my mind like a wound that refuses to close, and now that day had come, without me. I tried to tell myself it was modern life, that young people did things differently now, Small ceremonies, less fuss. But deep down, I knew this wasn't about convenience. It was strategy, Ryan's strategy, to cut me away, like trimming the edges of a photo until only he remained in the frame with her. Later that afternoon, I took out the family album. My fingers traced the photographs, Chloe's gap-toothed smile when she lost her first baby tooth, her high school graduation cap slipping sideways, the moment she hugged me after her first nursing shift, when she shadowed me at the hospital. Every page reminded me I had been there for every step, every stumble, every triumph, and now I had been written out of the most important moment of her life. When Ellen called to check in, I told her. She exploded. She didn't even invite you? Karen, that's insane. This man is trying to erase you completely. I know, I whispered. It feels like déjà vu, like William all over again. Ellen's voice softened. Don't let it play out the same way. Don't let this man control the story. But how? I wondered. How could I stop it when Chloe herself was pushing me away? That night, unable to sleep, I went to the Cape Cod cottage alone. The drive took 2 hours, the road bending through towns that still smelled faintly of salt and fried clams. When I pulled up, the house greeted me like an old friend, its shingles silver in the moonlight. I unlocked the door and breathed in the familiar scent of seagrass and old wood. This house had been my anchor when William's betrayal nearly drowned me. It had sheltered me, Chloe, even Ellen when she needed a break from city life. And now Ryan wanted it too. I walked through the rooms, the little kitchen with its squeaky drawers, the living room where Chloe used to sprawl on the rug reading novels, the upstairs bedroom where I could hear the ocean even with the windows shut. I tried to imagine Ryan here, lounging on the sofa, opening my cabinets, walking barefoot on my porch as if it belonged to him. The thought made my stomach turn. I sat at the writing desk, the same desk where my aunt had once paid bills, and stared at the grain of the wood. There had to be something I could do, some way to protect Chloe and myself from this man who had woven himself into our lives so quickly, so completely. Days later, my answer arrived, not by chance, not by miracle, but by choice. I picked up the phone and dialed an old number I hadn't called in years. Jason Whitmore, a private investigator I had known since my nursing days, when he occasionally came to the hospital to check on clients. He had once told me, Karen, if you ever need the truth about someone, you know who to call. When he answered, his voice was steady, familiar. Karen Brooks, it's been a while. Yes, I said. I need your help. It's about my daughter's new husband. There was a pause. Tell me everything. And I did. Every detail from his polished suit to the way he circled questions around the beach house. Jason listened without interruption, then said, You were right to call. Give me some time. The waiting was agony. Each day I woke to more posts online. Chloe with Ryan's family, Chloe in a cocktail dress at parties I hadn't been invited to. Each image was another cut, another reminder that I had been replaced in her life by a man who wore charm, like a weapon. One evening my phone buzzed. It was Jason. I've got something for you. You might want to sit down. I did. And the words that followed cracked open a door I hadn't even known was there. What I discovered next made me realize I wasn't just being left out. I was being replaced. Jason did not waste words. He never had. That was part of what made him good at his job. When he called me back with his findings, his sentences were stripped bare, as though the truth itself required no embellishment. Karen, he began, your instincts were right. Ryan isn't who he says he is. The air seemed to leave my kitchen. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, gripping the edge of the counter. What do you mean? His voice was steady, professional. The name Ryan Miller is an alias. His legal name is Ryan Morrison. He never attended Wharton, though his resume claims it. He never worked at Goldman Sachs either. His supposed consulting firm? Nothing but a registered shell. No clients, no employees, no revenue. The words rattled around me like loose change spilling from a broken jar. For a moment, I couldn't make sense of them. But Chloe believes... Of course she does, Jason cut in, not unkindly. He's meticulous. He's been engaged at least twice before, both times to wealthy women. Both engagements ended suddenly when the families started asking questions. The women themselves were humiliated, heartbroken. One even lost a portion of her savings. He's a predator, Karen, a financial predator. I sank into a chair, clutching the phone so hard my knuckles whitened. Outside, the late spring breeze rattled the maple leaves. Inside, I felt myself shaking. Does Chloe know any of this? Not yet. And if you tell her outright, she may not believe you. Men like him are skilled at twisting suspicion into paranoia. She'll think you're jealous, controlling. Jason paused. But there's more. You need to hear it. I braced myself. His uncle is Jonathan Reed. Does that name mean anything to you? I froze. My mind went back decades, to nights when William came home late with smoke on his breath and excuses on his lips. Jonathan Reed had been William's business partner, the man who siphoned off funds, who vanished with millions while leaving us drowning in debt. He was the reason I refinanced my house, the reason I pulled double shifts until my hands cracked from endless hand-washing at the hospital. Yes, I whispered. I know him. Well, Jason said, his voice tightening, Reed has kept those stolen funds hidden in offshore accounts for years, and guess who has access now? The room seemed to tilt. Ryan, I whispered. Exactly. This wasn't random, Karen. He didn't just stumble into Chloe's life. He targeted her, because as William's only heir, she represents legitimacy. If he can bind her finances to his, he can launder that dirty money and cloak it in respectability. He's been planning this. I felt my throat close. My daughter wasn't simply in a bad relationship. She was caught in a scheme older than she was, tangled in the very betrayal that had once wrecked our family. Jason's voice softened, as if he could sense the memories pressing down on me. I'll send you the documents. Bank records, falsified resumes, even engagement announcements from the other women. You'll have proof, but you need to be careful. He's desperate, and desperate men don't like being exposed. When the call ended, I sat in silence for a long while, the phone resting like a weight in my lap. Outside, a siren wailed down Commonwealth Avenue, then faded into the night. I tried to steady my breathing, but each inhale carried shards of the past. William's betrayal, the late bills piling like snowdrifts, Chloe asking why Daddy didn't come home anymore. And now here it was again, another man with polished shoes and polished lies, circling my daughter like a hawk. Later that evening, I spread Jason's packet across my dining table. Pages rustled under my hands. Photographs of Ryan with other women, screenshots of falsified credentials, diagrams of offshore transfers. There was even a grainy image of him shaking hands with Reed outside a hotel in New York, a faint smile on both their faces. I stared at those images until the lines blurred. My chest tightened, and tears slid hot down my cheeks. Not just for Chloe, but for myself. For the years I had believed that William's choices belonged to the past, for the illusion that our pain had been buried under time. But the past hadn't died. It had dressed itself in a younger suit and come knocking on my door again, through my daughter. I knew I couldn't simply march to Chloe and wave these papers under her nose. She was too deep inside Ryan's spell. If I pushed too hard, she would only retreat further. He had already convinced her I worried too much, that I clung too tightly. If she saw me as the enemy, I would lose her completely. But doing nothing was impossible. I owed her more than silence. So I began to plan. I gathered every scrap of information Jason had sent me, arranging them in a neat stack. I added copies of old newspaper clippings about Reed and Williams' failed company. I dug out bank statements from the years when our lives had collapsed, highlighting the missing funds, the betrayals hidden in columns and numbers. Slowly, painfully, I assembled it all into one story, the true story. And as I slid the last page into the folder, a strange calm settled over me. It wasn't rage, not exactly. It was resolve. Ryan wanted to build a future on lies, but I would give Chloe the truth, even if it broke her heart in the short run. Better a broken heart than a broken life. I tied the folder with a white ribbon I found in my sewing drawer, the kind I once used to wrap Chloe's birthday presents. To anyone else, it would look like a gift, a wedding gift, and in a way, it was. The most important one I could give. When the package sat there, waiting on my table, I almost laughed at the irony. He wanted my house. He wanted my daughter. He wanted our history rewritten to include him. What he would receive instead was a box full of his own sins, gift-wrapped by the mother he had tried to erase. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Power. Not over Chloe, never her, but over the truth itself. I could not force her to believe me, but I could plant a seed so undeniable that even his lies could not smother it. I closed my eyes, imagining his face when he opened it, when the mask slipped, when the perfect stranger revealed the predator beneath. "This," I whispered into the quiet of my dining room, "is one wedding gift you won't forget." The package sat on my dining room table for 2 days before I found the courage to deliver it. It looked almost beautiful in its simplicity. A plain folder dressed in ivory paper, tied with a ribbon that had once adorned a Christmas box of chocolates. From across the room, it might have seemed like a thoughtful token, a gesture of love from a mother to her newlywed daughter. But I knew better. Inside was not love, but truth. And truth, I had learned, can be more explosive than dynamite. I debated endlessly about how to give it. Should I hand it to Chloe directly, risk the confrontation face to face, watch her eyes flicker between love and disbelief? Or should I leave it where Ryan himself would find it, letting the lies unravel in his hands? In the end, I chose the latter, not because I wanted to hurt Chloe. God knows that was the last thing I wanted, but because I knew Ryan would never allow her to see those documents if I gave them to her. He would smile, pat her hand, and toss my folder in the nearest fire. No, the only way forward was to confront him with proof he could not dismiss. On a gray Saturday evening, I drove to their apartment building in Cambridge. The streets glistened with recent rain, lamps casting halos on wet pavement. My heart pounded as I climbed the steps and placed the gift at their door. I pressed the ribbon flat, whispered a prayer for strength, and walked away before doubt could drag me back. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, waiting for the phone to ring. Every creak of the house made me sit up. I thought of Chloe opening the door to find the package. I thought of Ryan's hands tearing the paper, his eyes narrowing as he saw his own face staring back at him from grainy photographs, his name spelled out in court documents and bank records. The call came at 11:43 p.m. The screen lit with Chloe's number, but when I answered, it was not my daughter's voice that thundered into my ear. "You crazy witch!" Ryan's tone was venom, stripped of all charm. Do you have any idea what you've done? I sat up, forcing my voice to remain calm. Yes, Ryan, I've told the truth. Every husband deserves to know his wife's family history. Consider it my wedding gift. He cursed, shouted, his words tumbling into one another, until finally he spat. You think you're clever? You think you've won? You've destroyed your own daughter's happiness. No, I said quietly. You destroyed it the moment you lied to her, the moment you tried to erase me. There was a slam, perhaps a door, perhaps the phone itself, and then silence. I sat in the dark, my hand trembling against the receiver, my breath coming in shallow bursts. My heart ached not from fear of him, but from fear of what Chloe would believe. Would she see him for what he was, or would she cling tighter, defending him against me? The next day answered my fears. Chloe arrived at my house, eyes blazing, folder clutched in her hands. She dropped it on my table, the ribbon torn. How could you? She demanded. How could you go behind my back like this? Ryan says you're trying to sabotage our marriage, that you never trusted him from the start. I wanted to reach for her, but she stepped away. Chloe, please, just read the documents. I did, she snapped, and I saw how far you'll go to make him look bad, digging up old articles about Uncle Jonathan, printing out rumors from the internet. This isn't proof, Mom. It's obsession. Her words cut deeper than any knife. She had taken the most painful parts of my life, William's betrayal, Reed's theft, the nights of scrubbing hospital floors just to keep her safe, and framed them as paranoia. Sweetheart, I whispered, do you remember Emma and Sarah? She frowned. Who? The women before you, the other fiancés. Their names are in the file. Talk to them, Chloe. Just call them, please. She shook her head. I don't need to. I know Ryan. He loves me. He's been nothing but good to me. You just can't stand not being the center of my life anymore. The word struck harder than Ryan's venom. My own daughter, the child I had raised alone, now saw me as the villain. She left soon after, slamming the door so hard the glass panes rattled. I stood in the kitchen staring at the folder she had left behind, pages spilling from its edges like wounds reopened. For the first time in decades, I felt utterly powerless. It was as if the past had come back in a younger man's face, and I was watching history repeat itself with the same cruel rhythm. William had once charmed me into silence, into complicity. Now Ryan was charming Chloe into blindness. But mothers do not quit, not when their children are in danger. I gathered the scattered papers, pressed them back into the folder, and tied the ribbon again. Maybe Chloe wasn't ready to see, but one day she would be. And when that day came, I would be ready to place the truth back in her hands. That night, I wrote in my journal, he thinks he has won. He thinks charm can outlast truth. But truth is patient. It waits. I had no idea that truth was already working, already seeping into cracks Ryan could not seal. What Chloe did next began to change everything. For a week after Chloe stormed out, the silence between us was absolute. No phone calls, no texts, not even a curt email. My house, once filled with the rhythm of her voice, seemed cavernous. I found myself setting 2 mugs of tea in the morning before catching the mistake and sliding one back into the cupboard. Old habits are cruel that way. They remind you of what you've lost, over and over. I tried to keep busy. I weeded the small patch of garden behind the house, baked bread I barely touched, reorganized closets that didn't need reorganizing. But every quiet hour returned me to the same gnawing thought. Had I pushed her further away? Had I handed Ryan the very ammunition he needed to paint me as controlling, paranoid, dangerous? On the 8th day, my phone finally buzzed. It was past 9 at night, and I nearly knocked over a lamp rushing to grab it. Chloe's name. My heart thumped so loudly I could barely hear her first words. Mom. Her voice was small, tired. I spoke to them. It took me a second to process. Spoke to whom? To Emma and Sarah, the women in your folder. I didn't believe you. Ryan said it was all fabricated, but I couldn't sleep. So I searched, and I found them. I held my breath. They told me everything, Chloe whispered. The same story, Mom. At first, he was perfect. Gifts, dinners, promises. Then he started isolating them. One woman said he made her cut ties with her brother. Another said he controlled every dollar she spent, and when her parents questioned him, he disappeared, leaving her with debt. Her voice cracked. It was exactly what you said, exactly what he's doing to me. My eyes filled. I pressed the phone to my ear as though I could hold her through it. Oh, Chloe, she went on, words tumbling now, the dam broken. And Mom, there's more. The FBI has been investigating him. They've been watching his accounts for years. One of the women gave me a contact. I called. An agent met me at a coffee shop yesterday. They already knew his name. They said he's been laundering money through shell companies tied to Uncle Jonathan. The name slashed through me like glass. Jonathan Reed. Even now, decades later, his betrayal reached into our lives like a ghost refusing to die. What did the FBI say? I asked carefully. They want my help. Chloe's breath shook. They want me to play along, pretend everything's fine, pretend I believe him. They think he'll let his guard down with me, brag about his plans. They'll record it, and then they'll have him. I gripped the edge of my chair until my knuckles whitened. The thought of my daughter, my only child, sitting across from that predator, pretending to love him while secretly helping federal agents, made my stomach twist. Chloe, it's dangerous, I said quickly. If he suspects, I know, she interrupted, but I can't live like this. I can't let him do to me what he's done to others. And Mom, her voice softened, trembled. I'm sorry. I should have listened to you sooner. I closed my eyes, letting the tears fall freely. All that matters is that you see him now, that you're safe. I'm not safe yet, she whispered, but I will be. When we ended the call, I sat for a long time in the quiet, staring at the folder still sitting on my table. For weeks it had felt like a burden, like evidence no one wanted to see. Now, it was the very thing that had cracked the illusion. Still, fear gnawed at me. I knew men like Ryan. Their charm was not just performance. It was armor, honed by years of practice. He would not go down easily. And if he suspected betrayal, if he even caught a hint of Chloe's cooperation with the FBI, he could turn dangerous. The following days stretched long and taut, like a string pulled too tight. Chloe kept me updated in hushed phone calls. She told Ryan she forgave him for the misunderstanding with me. She smiled at him, let him believe the rift between us had widened, that she was his alone. And in return, he began to speak more freely, more arrogantly. She described his voice when he talked about expanding their accounts, about using her inheritance to grow their future. It was the voice of a man who believed he was untouchable. The FBI set up surveillance, wiring her apartment, positioning agents nearby. They needed one more meeting, one more conversation that would make his guilt undeniable. Chloe told me it would happen soon, a dinner, just the two of them, where he would finally reveal his full plan. I tried to be brave when she told me. I nodded, said she was strong, said she was doing the right thing. But when the call ended, I broke. I pressed my hands to my face and sobbed, like I hadn't sobbed since the night William left for good. because I knew the truth. No matter how strong Chloe was, no matter how carefully the FBI planned, everything could still collapse in an instant. Late one evening, unable to sleep, I drove back to the Cape Cod cottage. The ocean was wild that night, waves crashing against the shore with a fury that seemed to echo my own. I stood on the porch, the wind tearing at my hair, and whispered into the darkness, "Please, God, don't let me lose her, not like this." Inside, I lit the old lamp and sat at the desk where the family Bible still rested. My aunt had once written in the margins, "Truth is the only gift that grows heavier when hidden, lighter when shared." I traced those words with my finger, realizing that was exactly what I had given Chloe. The truth. Painful, shattering, undeniable truth. And though it had nearly broken us apart, it had also brought us back together. The storm outside raged on, but within me something shifted. I was no longer the powerless woman Ryan had dismissed as old and paranoid. I was a mother, and mothers are steel when their children are in danger. I didn't know exactly how the night of that dinner would unfold, only that it would decide everything. Either Ryan would continue his charade, or he would hang himself with his own words. Either Chloe would walk free, or she would fall deeper into his snare. I stayed at the cottage until dawn, listening to the waves crash like a heartbeat against the shore, steady and relentless. And when the first light broke over the water, I whispered the promise aloud. We will not be his victims, not anymore. The night they set the trap for Ryan, I will never forget the sound of the knock on that door. Dusk slid over Cambridge like a shade being drawn. I sat in the back of an unmarked SUV, a half-block from Chloe's building, my palms open on my knees the way nurses do before the first incision. Agent Parker, a woman with kind eyes and the calm of a steady metronome, sat beside me with a small receiver and a headset that looked too flimsy to carry so much hope. "You're sure?" I had asked her an hour earlier. She'd nodded. "We have a warrant, Mrs. Brooks. Tonight we're here to listen. If he incriminates himself, we move." Listening is a strange kind of courage. It asks you to stay still when everything in you wants to run. Through the headset, I could hear the softest things, the glug of wine into glasses, the muted scrape of a chair, the feathered edge of my daughter's voice. "Thank you for coming," Chloe said, as if they hadn't spoken in days. "I made your favorite." She hadn't told me what the favorite was, only that it would be familiar enough to lower his guard. I pictured my lemon bars on a white plate and almost smiled at the thought of a dessert being a weapon. Ryan's voice came smooth, self-satisfied. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble." He sounded closer to the microphone. Later I'd learned she'd pinned it inside her sweater near the collar. He complimented the meal, complimented her, complimented the apartment, as if it hadn't been theirs for months. The performative warmth rolled through the wire like steam. Then, slowly, he turned to money. "You've been thinking about what we discussed, right? Consolidating accounts. It's just smart." Parker's finger lifted, a cue to me that the conversation had shifted to what mattered. I held my breath. Chloe was perfect. "I want to do what's best for us," she said. And even through the tinny line, I could hear the tremor she fought to hide. "You'll handle the transfers? I don't understand all the steps." "Of course," he murmured. "That's why you have me. We'll get access to your existing accounts, add me as joint, and then we'll move funds to higher yield investments under the firm. The Cape place." He paused casually. "We should put that into a trust that I manage, for tax efficiency." Parker tapped once on the armrest. Another signal. He'd said the house. He'd said the plan. Beside her, Agent Williams scrolled a notes app without looking down, as if the words were already carved into his mind. Chloe asked the questions the agents had coached with her. "Wouldn't that look strange?" she said gently. "So soon after we married." Ryan's chuckle was the kind that makes a mother's neck bristle. "Sweetheart, people do it all the time. You have the inheritance. I have the expertise. Once everything is under my management, nobody can interfere. Not your mother, not anyone." He said the word inheritance with a practiced softness, the way a jeweler says diamond. Through the wire, I heard the click of a pen, the sound of a glass set down. He leaned in. "Look, the accounts my uncle opened overseas are perfectly legal. They're just discreet. We'll ladder your assets through them to avoid scrutiny, and then bring them back clean through the firm. When we file jointly next year, it'll be seamless." He lowered his voice, conspiratorial. "You want our future safe, don't you?" Parker's eyes met mine. In them I saw the quiet flare of yes. This was the admission they needed. Intent, method, motive, the whole scaffold of his scheme. I thought of Jonathan Reed, of my younger self signing loan papers with shaking hands, of every night I'd counted out change at the grocery store and told Chloe it was a new game. Ryan's voice kept going, detailing percentages, timing, the necessity of temporary control. He never once said the word launder. Predators rarely use the ugliest word for the thing they do, but the map he drew had only one destination. Inside the apartment, a chair scraped again. Chloe's breath brushed the mic. I knew that sound as well as I knew the sea. "If it's truly best," she said, "you'll put it in writing. For me. So I understand." I almost applauded. Parker gave the tiniest incredulous smile. Mothers recognize other mothers' daughters. Ryan hesitated, then recovered. "We'll draft something informal," he said. "Notes. Not the kind of thing we hand to a bank. Our version." "That's it," Williams murmured. He motioned to the team waiting outside in the corridor. I hadn't seen them arrive, 3 soft-footed shadows in civilian clothes. Through the headset, I heard the faintest alignment of bodies, the quiet choreography of accountability approaching. Then, a sound I will hear in my bones as long as I live, a firm, hollow knock. The room inside the SUV stilled. On the wire, chairs scraped. Ryan's voice sharpened. "Are you expecting someone?" "No," Chloe said, slow and steady. I could picture her lifting her chin, the way she used to before diving into cold Cape water. The knock came again, followed by a measured voice. "Federal agents. Mr. Ryan Morrison. We have a warrant. Please open the door." The next seconds arrived in a rush-tide collage. Footsteps, the rattle of a deadbolt, commands in calm tones. Hands visible. "Step back. Ma'am, you're safe." My fingers dug crescents into my knees. Parker, watchful, listened for any hint of danger, ready to move. Ryan tried charm first. He always did. "This is a misunderstanding," he said smoothly. "My wife is confused. Sir, step toward the table." He tried indignation next. "You have no right to be here. This is harassment." "Hands where we can see them." He tried me last. "This is her mother's doing, isn't it?" The word mother came out like a slur. "She's been poisoning you since day one." Through the wire there was a pause, a breath, a decision. Chloe's voice, now crystal clear. "No, Ryan. I'm the one who called them." The cuff ratchets clicked. A mundane sound, the sound of a jar lid, the sound of a life sealing itself shut. I didn't realize I was crying until Parker passed me a tissue. Her gaze turned respectfully to the windshield. "It's over," she said softly. "He's in custody." But it wasn't over, not really. The word custody means held, not finished. Held for processing, for charging, for a courtroom where strangers weigh what the people who love you already know. In the receiver, I caught one last sound, not Ryan's voice, not the shuffle of agents. It was Chloe, exhaling a breath she must have been holding since the day he slipped a ring on her finger. Within minutes, the corridor emptied. Parker signaled to Williams. They would bring Chloe down the back stairs to avoid the hallway gathering of neighbors, whose curiosity was already rising like steam from a manhole. "You can meet her at the curb," Parker said, then added gently, "if she wants that." She did. The back door opened, and there she was, my daughter, pale and shaking but whole. We stood there a heartbeat apart, two women on a sidewalk that had seen 1,000 ordinary nights. Then she took one step, and I took one step, and we were in each other's arms. I felt the tremor leave her body the way a fever departs at dawn. "I'm sorry," she whispered into my shoulder. "I'm so sorry." "You're safe," I said over and over, like a benediction. "You're safe, you're safe, you're safe." Parker cleared her throat softly. "We'll take her statement tonight," she said. "You can come to the field office, Mrs. Brooks. We may need background on Reed." I nodded. The name had lost none of its sting, but for the first time it didn't own me. We drove through the city in quiet convoy. The SUV, the sedan with Chloe and an agent, the long ribbon of brake lights leading us toward a building with fluorescent ceilings and vending machines that pretended to be generous. Chloe signed papers with a hand that only shook a little. I told the story of a different decade and a different man, and watched the agents fit the old betrayal into the new crime like pieces of a century-old puzzle. Just before dawn, they let us go. The sky over Boston was the cleanest gray I'd ever seen, a color that promised light if you were patient. At the curb, Chloe squeezed my hand. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, "we let the truth keep doing what it does." By mid-morning, headlines would carry his name and the charges. By evening, the story would no longer belong to rumors or to me. It would belong to the record. The morning news broke before the sun was fully up. Ryan's face, that polished, practiced smile, stared from the television screen in my kitchen, framed by bold letters, "Financial conman arrested in Cambridge." I stood there in my robe, coffee untouched, watching as anchors recited his crimes: fraud, wire transfers, conspiracy, identity falsification. The charges piled high like the debts he'd left behind in the lives of others. By noon, the story had spread across Massachusetts and beyond. Former co-workers came forward. Women he had courted contacted reporters. Even families from past engagements spoke up. Every secret he thought he had buried was being unearthed, one headline at a time. And through it all, I felt a strange mix of grief and vindication. Grief that Chloe had endured his grip, vindication that the world now saw him as I had always seen him. Not a suitor, not a husband, but a predator. The trial began months later in a federal courthouse in Boston, its solemn marble halls echoing with footsteps that seemed to carry history. I sat in the gallery on the first day, clutching Chloe's hand. She wore her hair simply, no longer tamed into the sleek styles Ryan had preferred. She had returned to herself, one strand at a time. When Ryan entered, shackled and escorted by guards, he glanced toward us. For years he had worn that charming armor, but now his smile cracked, his eyes darting like a man searching for an exit that didn't exist. He tried even then to perform, speaking smoothly, insisting on misunderstandings and exaggerations. But the evidence was relentless. Documents, recordings, Chloe's own testimony, each piece stacked higher until it towered over him, undeniable. At one point, the prosecutor asked Chloe to recount the night of the reconciliation dinner. My daughter's voice was steady, clear. She She spoke of his plans to drain her accounts, his schemes to place the beach house under his control, his boasts about overseas funds. The courtroom was silent, every listener held by the weight of her words. I watched Ryan's shoulders tense as the net he had woven closed around him instead. The verdict came swiftly, guilty on all counts. The judge's voice was calm, almost gentle, as she sentenced him. 10 years in federal prison, restitution to his victims, and a permanent ban from working in finance. Ryan lowered his head, the fight gone from his posture. The man who had once filled rooms with his presence now seemed small, shrunken, just another number in a system he thought himself too clever to face. Afterward, Chloe and I walked out of the courthouse together. The press swarmed, cameras flashing, questions shouted. Chloe squeezed my hand and whispered, "Don't answer. Just keep walking." So we did, shoulder to shoulder, through the chaos and into the clean air of the city beyond. Life after the trial didn't return to what it had been before. How could it? But it found a new rhythm. Chloe reclaimed her maiden name. She moved into a small cottage near the Cape Cod house, close enough that I could see her porch light from mine on clear nights. We spent holidays together again, Christmas mornings with Coco, summer evenings grilling on the deck while the ocean whispered against the shore. The distance Ryan had tried to carve between us had been bridged, stronger than before. One afternoon, Chloe sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "Mom, I want to do something with this, something good." She spoke of the women she had met, Emma, Sarah, others who had fallen into Ryan's trap. Their stories echoed hers, their wounds still fresh. "They need help," she said. "They need a place to turn before it's too late." And so the Karen Brooks Foundation was born, not my idea, but hers, named in my honor. With her inheritance and the restitution the court ordered, she funded programs for women facing financial manipulation and coercive control, support groups, legal aid, educational workshops, seeds planted across the country. I attended the first event, standing in a crowded community center as Chloe spoke at the podium. Her voice carried steady and strong, telling our story not as tragedy but as warning, as empowerment. I wept quietly in the back row, surrounded by women nodding in recognition. Now, when I sit on the porch of the Cape House and watch the sun sink behind the dunes, I think about gifts, not the kind wrapped in ribbon, though I will never forget the folder that changed everything. I think about the invisible gifts we give: truth, resilience, courage. Ryan had tried to take those from us, to replace them with silence and submission. But in the end, he had given us something else entirely: a reason to rise, to fight, to build something lasting out of the wreckage. Chloe sometimes asks me if I regret the way it all unfolded, if I wish I had stayed silent, avoided the conflict, let her live in blissful ignorance a little longer. My answer is always the same. No, sweetheart, because silence is not love. Truth is love, and truth is the only gift that cannot be stolen. When I look back now, I realize Ryan wanted to rob us of more than money or property. He wanted to rob us of trust, of closeness, of the bond between mother and daughter. But he failed, because the wedding gift I gave Chloe, a simple folder of papers, became the bridge back to each other. And that, in the end, was the greatest gift of all.